Mabuhay, this is Bob from Love Beyond the Sea. How do you know if your marriage to a Filipina is working or if your relationship is working? A lot of people want to be married still. A lot of people have given up. I didn't give up, and 7 years ago plus, I married a wife from the Philippines without having a lot of experience. However, I had listened to a lot of people and learned a lot of things, and but really didn't know how it was, if it was going to work. How do you know for sure? Well, you can't really look 30 years ahead, but you can do some things and measure them in shorter periods. So I want to talk about that today. Please subscribe to Love Beyond the Sea. I just want to help guys in a relationship with a Filipina or to consider getting into one. Because if you're looking for a wife and haven't given up by now, overseas has been and still is an option. But how do you know if it's working? Well, I think it's a good idea right off the bat to just acknowledge the fact that, you don't know what's going to happen down the road. You want to find somebody that's, where the two of you are walking in step. You're in sync with each other. And we'll list some other things here. Look at people have been married 15, 20 years, get divorced. So did it work for 15, 20 years and then all of a sudden something happened and it unraveled? Had it maybe stopped working a long time ago and they just endured staying married? Does that mean it's working? Marriages can be in different stages where there are problems and they're actually doing something to try to make it better, or they can just be lasting. So since I know you don't want to just endure a relationship, and neither do I just jotted down these things. You have a good chance that it's going to work out if you want to spend time together. Excuse me. There's that cough. Always happens, never happens until I do a video. But do you to want to spend time together? If it's forced, or if it's contrived, or if it's out of necessity or mandatory, well, that's not a good sign. After a period of time, a couple years or so, if you don't really feel like you want to be with each other, that's not a good sign for long-term progress. How about who's most important? I've done videos on this, now and then about prioritizing your spouse. And since my videos are mostly to men, that's my vantage point. So is the wife, if you're married, more important to you than you are? If so, that marriage has a chance to last. Because if the husband ever thinks he's most important, then when things don't go his way, he's going to give up, and he's got to be the one to hold it together. Another trait is forgiveness. How easily do you and your Filipina forgive each other? Is it 3 or 4 days of silence and avoidance and arguing, or do you make amends fairly quickly because it bothers you so much and you want to have peace in the relationship, and then you make up quickly? So being able to forgive, if that's going on, then the relationship is likely to continue because we're both going to need it. What about sacrifices being made? I think the husband, if anybody has to sacrifice, should be the male, the husband, since he's, I think, more or less running the show, or the CEO, or he's responsible for God. Those are just different terminologies for the husband being the head of the wife. So I think sacrifices need to start with him. Being realistic. Are you realistic? Have you heard so much good things about Filipinas and women from other countries that you assume that it takes no amount of work or effort? You have to be realistic. You've got your rough edges like I did, like the woman you marry is going to have, and won't find out some of those either until you've been married. So can you stay realistic, not have unrealistic expectations? How about trust? If you had to rate trust on 1 to 100, what is your trust level in each other? It should be 100%. And if it's not, if it's a 90, 95%, find out what's keeping you It could be you, it could be her, but talk about it, because there should be total trust. Otherwise, it could be like a hole, and it just keeps getting wider. So trust is important. How about this one? Can you spend time apart? Now, I don't like necessarily not being around my wife. I know she'll be home tonight and we'll be together, but I don't relish the thought of spending a few days or a few weeks without her, but I have to be able to, especially when she lives in another country and might want to go back home and be by herself that time, and I may not want to always go on the trip back. But, am I controlling? Does she have to be with me all the time? If, you do have some life apart from each other, that's a good thing too. How about your planning? Do you plan together? Short term, long term, where do you go on vacation, purchases, anything? Or do you just say, oh, well, I didn't think you cared, or why should you care? I just did this or made this decision. I would say if it's a big decision, then it should be made together, whether it's a purchase or a plan or something, especially if it's going to cost money. I guess that would be a big issue. Then do you plan together, or do you still living like you're single? And then my last one I listed here, how imperative is it that you make it work? Like I started, some marriages they're lasting, but they're kind of like enduring each other. It doesn't seem to be healthy. But if you really, it's so important, of utmost importance to you, that it stays together, then it's probably going to stay together, because you're going to do everything you can to maximize your strengths and improve your weaknesses, so that you can have a marriage that lasts until death do us part. So we don't know, how it all ends when we get started, but I think the responsibility is with us men, with our love beyond the sea.